Green, it isn't over. Not yet. Don't, you can't die. Green, it isn't over. Don't, not yet. You can't die. Wake up, Green. Wake up. Green isn't over. Don't up. Not you can't die, Green. Wake up.
Hey everyone! This is pretty neat. It's small, it's compact, it's fun to just fidget around with. I can easily hold it in my hands, and it doesn't require any extra hardware. It's a perfect little gaming system. Oh. Never mind. The handheld video game console, a staple in gaming as a whole, and also the only way Nintendo stayed relevant after 1989. Handheld video game consoles are small, handheld gaming devices that allowed you to play games from a publisher with minimal extra hardware, like the Nintendo Game Boy. You'd slot in a game and start playing on a dimly lit green screen. But even though Nintendo is known for their handheld consoles, they weren't the first. That honor would of course go to Mattel in 1976 with the first ever handheld game, Auto Race. Now, this release was huge for the time. Not to mention, it was an entire year before the Atari 2600 was released, and 4 years after the Magnavox Odyssey was released. The very fact that this tiny little handheld was able to play anything at all at this level was incredible. So, seeing this, every company knew what they had to do. Plagiarism. Nintendo was, of course, the first to hop onto this revolutionary idea. After 100 years of being a card and toy manufacturer, Nintendo saw the rise of video games in the market with the Atari 2600 and the Pong game consoles, resulting in the Pong crash. So, in 1989, Nintendo released a line of handheld LCD game systems called Game & Watch. They were pretty simple games, just something small to pass the time. It used the same technology as an LCD calculator, the kind that you see out of school, where charge is sent to a series of pixels that show an image. But there's something different about the Game & Watch systems not previously seen before. They had the capacity to have 2 screens and run 2 different games on the same system. At the same time, in late 1979, the Milton Bradley Company made their very first handheld known as the Microvision. It was also the very first handheld to use interchangeable cartridges, which really changed the high-end market for handhelds at the time. Your handheld wasn't shit if it couldn't play Breakout and then be switched out with Vegas slots. The Microvision also used LCDs, but it was quickly discontinued for 3 major problems. 1, poor keypads. The keypads on the Microvision were designed to be overly thick with a thin printed plastic overlay to last longer. However, this heavily backfired and caused the plastic to stretch more and more and eventually just deteriorate. 2, screen rot, which was the result of the LCD leaking and causing permanent dark spots on the screen. And 3, ESD damage. Due to a lack of protection on the microprocessor, in the event that someone opened up the console's protective door, the console would be subject to any static charge the user has built up, causing it to immediately short circuit.
They're dead. They're all dead. Why me? Why me? Why do I get to live? Why? It's his fault. He killed me. He killed me. Great, why? Why great, why? Why? That's why.
Hi, welcome to GameGo. How may I help you?
We're broken.
He's a rogue Zeb. Just like us.
And Ginkgo broke us. I can't let their deaths be in vain. Gray, I will find you. And I will kill you. You and the CEO. And the founder. I will end Ginkgo.
While the Microvision was first to utilize game cartridges, it ultimately failed due to its ambitious small size, much like myself. However, Nintendo would take this design and alter it for themselves to make their brand new and highly successful handheld, the Game Boy. After the major success of the NES, Nintendo knew they had to keep riding this incredible high that they stumbled upon, and what better way to do that than to ride with you. Introducing the Game Boy, released in 1989 and utilizing game cartridges, because your handheld wasn't shit if it couldn't play Pokemon and then be switched out with Pokemon. Or Tetris. The handheld itself was incredibly bulky, which makes sense given the fact that it needed 4 AA batteries and a processor to run all the information on an actual digital screen. Of course, to keep the handheld simple, the Game Boy ran off of binary, meaning it could only display pixels as on or off. This resulted in pretty lackluster games with overly simplified graphics. However, it still sold massively, boosting Nintendo even further. All without mentioning games like Tetris, Pokemon, Kirby, Pokemon Again, Link's Awakening, Kirby 2, Pokemon a third time, Dr. Mario, and who could forget Pokemon for the 4th time. But Atari was close behind with their very own handheld, the Atari Lynx, also released in 1989, with a backlit screen and a color display, both things that the Game Boy lacked, and the ability to be flipped for left-hand players. How did this fail? Unfortunately for the Lynx, the Game Boy was just way too widely known and ultimately completely overshadowed the Lynx release. Not to mention the lack of developer support and how quickly it drained batteries. The Lynx was just inferior to the Game Boy, all things considered. From here, not many major releases or changes happened at the market, so I'm just going to read off my script. The Turbo Express was just a Game Boy but with better resolution. The BitCorp Game Mate was just kind of there and then it wasn't. The Sega Game Gear was just the Sega Master System shrunk into a handheld for Sega to press more competition onto Nintendo, which they were already doing plenty with the Genesis by itself and its incredible marketing. The Watsura Supervision was just a Game Boy, but compact and for TVs, and that's about it. And then in 1994, we saw the release of the Super Game Boy, which wasn't a handheld. Instead, it was a cartridge that could be inserted into the SNES and allowed you to play Game Boy games on the big screen. But finally, something big would happen in 1995 with Sega's Nomad handheld. This was designed to be the next big thing for Sega, but at the time, Sega was already dealing with 5 consoles, all at the same time. The Genesis, Master System, Game Gear, Pico, a computer software, and the new Sega Saturn alongside the CD and 32X add-ons for their consoles. Having a new handheld would just be way too much for the company to handle. So Sega opted to just hope for the best for the handheld, giving it minimal support and opting to focus on their favorite child, the Sega Saturn, which still failed. 1996 saw the release of the Tamagotchi, an LCD digital pet device, and Nintendo's remake of the Game Boy, given the new technological advancements. This would be the Game Boy Pocket, which was just a Game Boy, but small. It did okay, but with the lack of difference between it and the original Game Boy, not many people saw a reason to buy it. 1997 had the release of the Gamecom, which was the first touchscreen. And that's about it. As I'm sure you've noticed, handhelds really didn't progress very much very quickly over time compared to the console industry. It was just a very slow burn until something big would happen. Digital color screens are now everywhere. Forget everything I just said, the handheld market is a fast burn. With the release of the first color smartphone, the Siemens S10, in 1998, color screens were now extremely easy to find and replicate. This would be first seen with the Game Boy Color, which was just a Game Boy with color. It did okay. Like the NES to SNES, there wasn't too much of a big difference when it came to marketing, so many assumed it was just a Game Boy with color and nothing more. And then the Neo Geo Color came out, which was just a handheld Neo Geo, which already had color as it was a home console. The Neo Geo Color ended up failing due to cost-cutting measures on packaging, opting to use cardboard to ship overseas rather than plastic coverings, leading to thousands of handhelds to be damaged during transport. A moment of silence for the lost Neo Geo Colors.
Okay. Find a weapon. Find CEO. Find Gray. Kill Gray. Kill the CEO. And the nightmare. Gray. Gray. Gray.
2001, and Nintendo was back with two big hits. I probably shouldn't say that. At the exact same time as the GameCube, which did okay, Nintendo released the Game Boy Advance. All it really added was shoulder buttons and better processing. It was also smaller. That's about it. The Game Boy Advance SP, don't ask me what the SP stands for, was just the same handheld, the Game Boy Advance, but it would now fold and it could be rechargeable, and I think it had a backlight, which a lot of handhelds didn't have at the time, so it was really hard to see the game if you weren't in proper lighting. But still, the Game Boy Advance SP used a folding design, which was pretty cool, and it's something we'll see later on down the line for Nintendo again. And the Game Boy Micro was just the Game Boy Advance, but small. It kind of feels like one of those bits where you joke around with a friend saying, "Oh, I bet you can't compact this thing super small," and then you do it just because why not? All of these handhelds did pretty well in their own regard. However, what they really suffered from was a lack of difference on a casual consumer basis, which is Nintendo's primary audience, of a difference between the new Game Boys and the older Game Boys. And the Game Boy Micro especially suffered from this. 2003 saw the release of Nokia's HandHeld. Moving on. 2004 had the release of the Nintendo DS, a completely new line of handhelds distinct from the Game Boys, using touchscreen and a larger 2-screen display. This handheld was perfect for the everyday user. Not to mention, it released around the same time as the Wii, making both of these consoles extremely consumer-friendly, which really helped Nintendo. Later, the DS Lite would be released, which made the DS smaller and removed backwards compatibility with the Game Boy line. The DSi and DSi XL would make the DS larger and add additional cameras and storage drive slots. Because of these additions, some people began walking around with their DSs to take pictures, since most phones lacked cameras. This includes me. For a good while, I'd bring my DS on every school field trip, not to play games, just to take pictures. As you've likely noticed, Nintendo had a very strong chokehold on the handheld market. If their consoles didn't do well that generation, their handhelds were sure to keep them afloat. However, there was a new competitor coming into the ring to properly challenge Nintendo: the PlayStation Portable.
PSP. It's like a nut you can play with outside.
I miss ads like these. The PSP, released in 2005, this was completely new. Handhelds had run-off cartridges for such an incredibly long time because adding discs would just make the handheld too big. But Sony found a perfect way around this, introducing Universal Media Discs, or UMDs. These discs were a bit smaller to the GameCube discs. However, they could easily hold a lot of data for games that were relatively small enough to fit on a portable handheld, like the PSP. Not to mention the massive screen available on the PSP and its compatibility with Wi-Fi, other PSPs, and of course, the PlayStation 3. With plenty of developer support, this handheld was almost perfect. And you're not gonna believe what happens next. It did really well. 80 million units sold. Of course, nowhere near the massive success of the DS. However, it did incredibly well for a very tightly controlled market by Nintendo. The PSP was amazing, and it was really great to see a different person other than Nintendo doing well in the handheld market. The success continued with the PSP Go, which was a smaller version of the PSP with a sliding controller and more space. However, the PSP Go wasn't really meant to last for very long. It mainly served as a cheaper option for those who still wanted a PSP and as a buffer while PlayStation continued to develop their next handheld. It did okay, which was expected. It was just a smaller version of an already existing handheld.
The body is disposed of? Perfect. And the sword is broken in half, right? Awesome. Okay, headed to the army? Okay, great. Call me when it's done. Now where is my helicopter? Drop it. Drop the sword. Where is he? Where is the CEO? Go. I did it.
And now Nintendo returns. After they struck gold with the Wii and DS, they knew what they had to do. Continue the line. Because that has never once gone wrong in the slightest. They would continue the Wii and DS brand with the Wii U and the 3DS. And I'm sure you can guess what happened.
Nintendo just didn't learn. The SNES didn't perform well because there was lack of marketing difference between it and the NES. The Game Boys didn't do their best because there was a lack of marketing difference between the new Game Boy and the original Game Boy. The Wii U didn't do well for the exact same reason, and the 3DS was no exception. You have to keep in mind, Nintendo's main consumers are casual consumers, buying these consoles and handhelds mostly for their kids and grandkids. Ask your grandma if she knows the difference between a DS and the new 3DS XL. Or the Wii to Wii U. The 3DS was released in 2011 and featured the ability to move a slider that would turn the graphics from 2D, like normal, to 3D. It was also backwards compatible with the DS, and it was pretty cool, all things considered. But with a lackluster release, not many major titles, and the lack of difference between it and the original DS, it just didn't do very well at all. What didn't help was how many versions of the 3DS there were. At almost every major holiday, a new 3DS would be released. These being, in no particular order, the 3DS, 3DS XL, 3DS LL, 2DS, new 2DS XL, new 3DS XL. 6 different models, with practically no changes in terms of hardware. Mix that with some really bad marketing, and you have a major loss, which definitely wasn't what Nintendo wanted at the time. What I find the funniest is the 3DS cartridges have this little lip that keep you from playing them on previous DSs. And the lip serves absolutely no function aside from that. It doesn't have any extra hardware space, it's just there to be a nuisance. And I find that incredibly funny. Now, with all this said, the 3DS wasn't awful. It did pretty well. It had a pretty neat gimmick, but just like the Wii U, the marketing was ultimately its downfall. But with Nintendo at their lowest, it was now the perfect time for PlayStation to step in with their new handheld. A phone. The Xperia Play, Sony's very own smartphone. Yes, this is a real thing and it did not do well. But Sony had the real handheld next. The PlayStation Vita, released in 2012 with a much better processor, more storage, a touchscreen, better graphics, partial backwards compatibility with the PSP, Bluetooth, and so much more. But something was missing. The PSP's party trick, handheld disc gaming. The Vita had gone back to using cartridges. I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the Vita's main way to get games was through the PlayStation Store. That would explain why they had extra processing and the lack of disk drive for complete backwards compatibility with PSP games that weren't available on PlayStation Store. This might have actually been the first attempt to make a fully digital gaming system, not to mention its remote play usability with the PS4. It would later be revised into the PS Vita Slim, which would decrease the size a little bit and replace the OLED screen with a cheaper LCD. It did pretty well overall, and it really didn't hit big with anyone and was just kinda okay. Still, it was a great improvement to the PSP. However, since then, PlayStation hasn't really gone back to handhelds in a pretty good while, but it'd still be really nice to see PlayStation go back into the handheld market with something that works fully with the PS5. However, there was a company that didn't know how to quit after losing so badly. Nintendo. Nintendo was back, baby! To kick off the 9th generation, the Nintendo Switch was released in 2017. Only 5 years after the release of the Wii U. Most Nintendo's fans, such as myself, were pretty worried about the Switch and what it could entail. The idea behind it was extremely experimental, choosing to combine both console and handheld aspects.
The console became known as a hybrid console, with detachable controllers made for multiplayer and a dock to put the console into high performance mode and cast it to a TV. This had never really been done before, and it was an incredibly innovative idea. The ads and the marketing for the system and its games also held up the console, generating plenty of pre-release hype. The Switch was shaping up to be an incredible release. And that's exactly what we got in March of 2017. The release of the Nintendo Switch was phenomenal. Most stores quickly sold out on the first day, and Nintendo kept their console with a decently low price of $299. Within less than a year, the Switch had completely outsold the Wii U in units, not to mention the amazing exclusives on the console: Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, Smash Ultimate, and many, many more. And this only increased as time went on. Later models would have a fully handheld version, the Nintendo Switch Lite, which was smaller and lacked the detachable Joy-Cons the base Switch had, and also didn't have any docking ability. However, it was fully handheld. There was also the OLED model, which just made the console larger, added a few quality of life features, and a better OLED screen. Since then, we've also gotten plenty of leaks and rumors of a Nintendo Switch 2. In fact, I'm actually recording this the day before Nintendo's Summer Direct, so maybe it's going to be announced then. However, I don't think a Switch 2 is going to do very well. Nintendo's still incredibly consumer friendly. That can easily be seen in 2020 with the high influx of people buying Animal Crossing and Nintendo Switches in 2020 because everyone's stuck at home and the pandemic and all that stuff. Just making a Nintendo Switch 2 or anything that has the words Nintendo and Switch in it just seems like it's bound to be a disaster, just like with the Wii and Wii U. It's likely that something like the Switch 2 is going to fail if it doesn't change too much, especially the marketing. It's, like I said just before, it's going to be the Wii to Wii U, the DS to 3DS, the Game Boy to the other Game Boys, the NES to SNES. It's all going to happen again. And it really sucks that Nintendo just doesn't learn from this. I do think whatever is being made is bound to be pretty good and at least be cool. All I hope is that it's at least more powerful than the current Nintendo Switch. And finally, we've reached the most recent handheld, the Steam Deck. Made by Valve, the developers behind the PC gaming store Steam, the Steam Deck was an all-new handheld that intended to be a fully portable and small PC. While the similarities with the Switch are obvious, the Steam Deck still stands fully on its own and can do more than just play games since it's a literal computer. Unfortunately, they're a little pricey, but it's still a cool step into PC handhelds that Sony or Nintendo could adopt later on. So there you have it, the full history of handhelds and consoles. I really hope you've enjoyed this series, and if this is the first video you've seen in this series going over the history of video games and consoles, I highly suggest you check out the other videos. There will be a playlist down in the description if you want to just binge all the episodes and get caught up with the history of video games, if that's something that interests you. Regardless, thank you all for watching this video, and if you've watched the rest of the series, thank you so much for your support. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm Seb, and have a great rest of your week. Bye! Gray? I thought they got rid of your body. You should be dead, buddy. Yeah, sec, you're not Gray. Who are you? Your end. Bold. I like that. It's a shame, because you're not making it out of here alive.
3, 2, 1, go!
Game breathing technique, form, potential, Kazuri.
Well, kid, this was fun. I'm gonna call it here.
Domain expansion. Divine room of creation.
No use struggling. I think I've won this one. I like you, kid. So, who are you? Oh! Sorry, I didn't see it sooner. I apologize. You're green. One of the little guys that Gray came in here with. You know, you fought better than him, little guy. I'm honestly surprised. It's a shame. Unfortunately, what you lacked, Green, was what Gray really had. A motive. What was your motive? Oh, I want to avenge my friends. Oh, they all died. Oh, boo-hoo. Please. So tell me, Green. Who are you? Who are you, Green? Green. Who are you? 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 I'm you. Along with being you, I'm GameGo. A system of capitalistic schemes and distrusts and cons, all working for me. All I am is lucky that I survived Gray's attack. And you're just a capitalistic douche who's constantly looking out for the next big win, unaware of what's going on around you. Along with all of that, I'm also Gray. I'm blue. I'm one of your many mercenaries. I'm Seb 2, I'm all of the Sebs, I'm every model of them. I am the founder. I'm GameGo, motherfucker. Domain expansion. Forested shore of the void. But most importantly, I'm Seb.
Please, I'm sorry. Please.
Now,
Please.
perish.
Good morning, world. My name is Adriel. Due to a shortage of Sebs, I will be taking over. It has been 3 months since the terrorist attack on the Gango building, with witnesses stating 3 rebel Sebs breaking into the building and causing mass havoc. Unfortunately, these led to the deaths of countless Sebs and Seb 2 prototypes at the hands of these rebels. According to the sources, the CEO was found dead outside the building along 2 halves of one of the rebel Sebs. Efforts were made to revive the CEO, however, they remain unfruitful. Locals are still on the hunt for the Seb 2 game reporter who was active that night. However, the efforts have come up empty. The closure of the Gango building has also led to mass outcry outside the building and around the world. Without Gango, other stores are lacking shipment for games, so a lot of the stores have begun shutting down. Whoever is behind all of this needs to be.
It's what Gray would have wanted. Let's start waking everyone up.